You're listening to Investigation Insiders by Integris Intelligence.
Hello again, everyone. This is Forhad. Hope you are well. Thank you for tuning into Investigation Insiders. We have something very, very interesting for you this time. I guess before we get into that, let me introduce our guests, and then we'll talk about what this episode will be about. So anyone that's in the investigative business, they know that you can't house every type of skill set under your roof. So we oftentimes rely on partner organizations or subcontractors that help kind of fill the gaps where we need to fill them. So our first guest is definitely in Integris's Rolodex, Sarah Nasir. She's a managing partner and co-founder of Integrity One Solutions, which is also an investigative firm that specializes in forensic accounting and regulatory compliance. She's got experience both in law enforcement and on the private sector, and her professional work experience spans 25 years, to include the New York City Business Integrity Commission, where she was the director of the Forensic Audit Unit, the Manhattan DA's office, private sector accounting firms, and of course, where she got her start, a senior investigative auditor with the New York City Department of Investigation. Welcome, Sarah. Happy to have you with us today. How are you?
Good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Did I miss anything there, or did I capture everything accurately?
Yeah, there's another long list of other items, but this is good. You captured everything.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So we also have with us today Mr. Barry Webne. Barry is an experienced controller and general manager. He currently has his own consulting firm, the Webne Consulting Group. He graduated from the University of Toledo in 1987, where he got an MBA. He's rapidly climbed the corporate ladder while serving with several companies in various accounting, management, and technology roles. And here's where it gets interesting. Barry is also a convicted felon. In fact, he was convicted twice for embezzling more than $1 million each from his employers between 92 and 96, and then again between 2001 and 2006. In each case, he was sentenced to incarceration in federal prison. Thanks for joining us, Barry. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Looking forward to chatting with you both and getting into our discussion today. So for everyone out there, today will be part one of a two-part series where we talk to Barry and Sarah about the two sides of embezzlement: committing the crime and hopefully preventing the crime, if not detecting it when it happens. In part one, we're going to focus on the crime. Barry, can you talk to us about how you became a two-time convicted felon?
Well, I will, and I appreciate you having me today. I think that, as you said before, I have my undergraduate degree from Auburn University. I have and I got my MBA from the University of Toledo. I never thought that I would commit a crime, and I wasn't born a felon. But my first real job, I guess, out of MBA school was with a company in Cleveland, Ohio, as a controller. I moved my family to Cleveland at the time, 2 daughters and my wife, and obviously I was living on the edge. I've never been a big drinker. I've never used drugs in my life. I'm not a gambler. I was strapped for cash, as everybody is, you know, right after you get married, and moved my family to Cleveland. Got this job as a controller, small company, less than 100 employees, maybe $12 million a year in sales, and went to work immediately. Felt the financial pressure of my home. I was in charge of accounts payable, paying the bills with the company. I was in charge of payroll for salaried employees. I was in charge of accounts receivable, and I was also paid a bonus for the financial performance of the company. So I was also put the financial statements together on a monthly basis. And probably a month after I started in Cleveland, I didn't know what I was going to do. I was 2 months behind on my car payment, and the financial pressure was pretty heavy. And I thought to myself, well, I'm going to try and make a loan from the company. I'm not going to say anything to anybody, but I'm going to borrow, $4,000 to $5,000. I'm going to write myself a check and see what happens. If I get caught, if my boss catches me, I'll say, I don't know what happened. That was a mistake. And I felt that I could recover from that and retain my job if it was discovered. I wrote myself a check for the $4,500, and back then we didn't have the internet, so I called the bank, the company's bank, to make sure that the check had cleared, and that was a couple days after I deposited the check in my account. And sure enough, the check was cleared. Check cleared the bank, $4,500 in my account, paid some bills, was happy, and I figured, well, nobody's gonna catch it now. And I figured if I destroyed the check, that would solve all my problems. I didn't realize that banks take copies of checks, and put the check through the shredder when the bank statement came through at the end of the month. I grabbed it, I reconciled the bank statement, and made an adjustment to the general ledger for $4,500, and everything was good to go. And like many addictions, and I'm not an expert on addictions, but once you do something the first time, it gets easier the second time. And a month after that, 3 weeks after that, I decided to do it again. And that $4,500 turned into about $20,000 a month. And it was like, just exactly like an addiction. Once you start, you can't stop. And I hear this a lot from people, victims, and that they can't control themselves. And that's pretty much the situation I was in. And over a 4-year period, it amounted to about $1,250,000. And nobody in the company really suspected anything. Every time I was asked, why are the financial statements, why are the assets accruals for the company growing so much, I had an easy answer for them. I was kind of the yes man with the company. I told them what they wanted to hear. And everybody trusted Barry. Boy, I remember we did have an audit every year. We had a local accounting firm come in and do an audit. And that was a time that I sweated things out because I was worried that they were going to uncover the crime. But as Sarah will tell you, roughly 4% of the time during an audit, crimes are discovered. Embezzlement crimes, if it's going on, will be discovered. So I didn't realize that at the time, but I sweated through each audit every year, and it was tough. But the auditors never picked it up. They're not paid to pick it up unless they come across something that forewarns that there's fraud going on. So after 4 years, the crime was discovered. I was put on paid leave and let go. and they had, I think they did the investigation themselves, and they came up with $1,250,000. And I remember being at home in the spring of 1996, and two gentlemen came to the door on a Friday afternoon and knocked on the door. My wife answered the door, and they said, "Is your husband around? We'd like to talk to him." And they said, "We're insurance agents." And I walked over, and one of the gentlemen took me aside and said, "Mr. Webne, we're with the FBI. Is there someplace we can go to talk?" And at that point, the load of the world had kind of come off my shoulders, because I knew that the waiting was over and I didn't have to look over my shoulder anymore. And I went down I had an office in the basement. I took them down to my office. They already knew what had happened. They already knew the truth, and I wasn't going to lie to them. And I told them everything that they knew. And basically, they told me, "Don't call us, we'll call you." And within 6 months, I had gone before the judge and was sentenced to, I think it was 33 months, between 30 and 36 months in federal prison. I was sentenced to 33 months in federal prison. They had a program at that time, back in the 1990s, called the Intensive Confinement Center, the ICC. It was a 6-month boot camp program for first-time nonviolent criminals. And the judge recommended me to that program. The Bureau of Prisons agreed, and I was allowed to do my 33-month sentence in 6 months and go home to my family. But to be honest with you, it was too fast. I didn't learn my lesson. I was released in 1997, January of 1997, went back to my wife and family, and got a job selling cars in Toledo. Worked for a car dealership for about 3 years. And in 2001, I thought to myself, boy, I never thought about whether I'm going to commit this crime again or not. I never really asked myself, what if I'm in the same position? Would I do the same thing? That never crossed my mind. And I think that a lot of that had to do with the time that I was away. 6 months is a short period of time to think about what puts you in that position. And there was an ad in the paper in 2001 for an accountant for a small company in Toledo, Ohio, and I put my application in, went to an interview, and was hired immediately. No background check, no nothing. And same position. I was in charge of the accounts payable. I was in charge of the accounts receivable, the general ledger, and the monthly financial statements. And it didn't take me more than a month or two to get back into the old swing of things. And I was experiencing financial difficulties at home, and I tested the water with a $4,000 check, and that $4,000 check eventually turned into, another $10,000 or $15,000 or $20,000 a month. And like I said, I wasn't into alcohol, drugs. It was material things. I was addicted. Boy, if I wanted a new car, I went out and bought it. Nothing stopped me. I had an open checkbook. And eventually, I was promoted to general manager of the company. So I was also in charge of the financial performance of the company, in addition to creating the financial performance of the company. And I was paid a bonus based on the financial performance of the company. So it was kind of a double-edged sword. Everybody loved me. I mean, boy, I wish all of our employees could be like Barry. When we ask Barry for a project to be completed, he gets it to us immediately, and the content is great and it looks great. And that's one of the red flags I think we're going to talk about eventually here. There's a bunch of red flags that pop up if you're a business owner and you think that you're being taken advantage of by one of your employees. There's a few red flags that pop up, and we'll talk about those, I guess. And
Yep.
I think they're important because I showed a lot of red flags. My general ledger, my accounts balanced to the penny. And boy, I thought, any question that I can take away or any question about my integrity that I can eliminate is going to help keep the crime covered up.
Barry, if I could interrupt for just a second on a couple of points that you made, and we'll get back to the story. Is there's two things that so far that strike a chord with me. One, financial pressures, and you said you weren't born a criminal. You didn't think you would be one, but the financial pressures push you in a direction where you took advantage of a situation that presented itself to you. The question I have for you is that trust. I mean, I hear that over and over in what you're saying in terms of gaining people's trust, right? Can you talk a little bit about what you did? Are there some things that you did to be, like you mentioned, being very good in the presentation and having the numbers pretty lined up, but it also sounded like people liked you. And were you actively doing things to earn trust and avoid answering any questions?
I believe that I'm a very likable person, and I will go out of my way to find common ground with you. And obviously I did that to a detrimental point. And my victims, I mean, I don't keep in contact with my victims, but they will tell you, boy, he had a direct interest in my life. And, my boss at the company in Cleveland, he was just a heck of a nice guy. And, I'd be concerned, and I genuinely was concerned, about his family. His mother was sick, and my family helped his mother get into a nursing home in Toledo. And I would always, if like the auditors would come in and I would, how's your wife doing? How's your baby? And I don't feel I'm a superficial person, but because I was committing a crime and trying to keep it covered up, I would do anything I could to help my situation. If you understand what I'm saying.
Sure. No, I definitely understand that. And Sarah, do you have anything to add to that, or any questions on anything Barry's said so far, or should we let him proceed with his with the rest of his story?
One of the things, actually, we wanted to ask you was what specifically, or how did you go about giving yourself or taking money out of the company? If you can be as explicit as you can.
I did it a couple ways. My first crime, I wrote checks directly to myself. The checks were not kept in a secure place. I had access to the checks. I was a pretty good forger. I could forge my boss's name, but I would also wait until my boss was getting ready to walk out the door. And I'd walk up to him with 3 or 4 blank checks, and I'd say, "Hey, John, I know you're in a rush, but I got to have these 4 checks signed. Just trust me. They're for legitimate purchases. And if you could sign these 4 blank checks, I'd appreciate it." And no problem. He trusted me. He didn't have any reason not to trust me. And he would sign the 3 or 4 checks, blank checks, and that would be it. The other way was through payroll. We used a third-party payroll service. I don't want to name names, but it was a nationally known company. And one of the first things I did was double my salary. Nobody asked to, the auditors included, nor my boss would ask to look at the salary payroll ledger ever. And that's one of the things I talk to try and teach business owners is it's okay to trust somebody, but verify what they're telling you. Not a one time in 4 years was I asked, show me the payroll ledger, show me the backup for these payroll checks.
That's an interesting point, Barry, about that, because I think about our own business and things sort of going out of funk and money being allocated in different places and things like that. It's interesting to me that you just earned that kind of trust. That people weren't even looking further. Were the companies that you took money from, were they flourishing at the times that you were there? Is that part of the problem? Was that because the company was making money and everyone was making money, they decided not to look further into it?
I think 2 things. First of all, they were making money. They were both in profitable positions, but they were also each instance or each crime. The company I worked for was owned by I don't know if you call it a conglomerate, but the corporate office owned 10 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 similar sized companies. Mm-hmm. So the president of my company was not really the president of the corporation. So he was my boss, but I also kind of reported to the financial person at the corporate office. So it wasn't like they were small, mom and pop companies. Sure. They were small, but I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that they were profitable. And when things are going good, when the economy's good and business is up, you have a tendency to, let things go.
Sure.
So Barry, if the company is doing really well and your expenses kind of remain the same, you're going to increase your take, or you're going to take more because the company is doing well. But isn't it true that you would have to kind of keep it at the same level or more? So you're going to end up taking more if the company is doing really well. If the company is doing less, you're still going to take the same amount. Would that be a fair assumption or comment?
I think in a lot of situations, to me, it really didn't matter. I took what I needed or what I thought I needed. So, if I needed, it was, like once a week, like $5,000. If the company would have been doing bad, so you're asking me if the company would have been doing poorly, would that have affected my take? Is that correct?
Yes.
I don't know. I think it may have had an impact, but it's all about greed. I think it's all about feeding that addiction. And you always, I hear a lot of people, a lot of perpetrators say, well, I just borrowed it. I'm going to pay it back. Another $5,000 and I'll pay it back. And it never gets paid back. And I think the same mentality goes with, I know things are down right now, but they're going to turn around. So I'll help myself. I guess in my situation, I kind of separated the two.
Sure.
If you follow what I'm saying.
Sure. So it almost sounds like, to follow up on Sarah's question, like regardless of whether the company was doing as well as it was or not that well, your drive would have led to finding a way to take the money that you need, almost, is what you're saying, right?
I disconnected the two. Yeah, correct. I mean, I think if you take a poll out of 10 perpetrators or 20 perpetrators, 19 out of 20 would say it's an addiction. You can't stop. Once you start, you can't stop.
Sure. Well,
that's my opinion.
That's interesting. So I guess getting back to the second company where you did this, so what ended up happening where you got caught and obviously got convicted for a second time?
Well, in the spring of 2006, now this had been going on for 4 years and it amounted to a little over $1 million. The internet was just coming online, and there was an article out there about the first crime I committed, and somebody mailed that to my boss. So I was put on administrative, paid leave, and they immediately sent their own people in to audit. And I subsequently hired an attorney because I knew what was coming. And just, it was just a matter of a couple weeks. And my boss called me. It was in maybe a couple weeks after this had happened. And one of the points I want to bring across today is the importance of hiring a professional company to investigate. If you're a business owner and you feel that you've been victimized, it's important that you do it professionally, get your documents together and get everything together from a professional standpoint, because that was not done in either situation. The second crime, after I hired my attorney told me, probably not a good idea to talk to anybody about this. And if you get a call from the company, contact me. Because we weren't so sure that they were going to press charges at that point. And sure enough, a couple weeks after I was let go, my boss called me on the phone and said, "We'd like you to come downtown and talk to us about going back to work." Well, I'm not stupid, and they knew what was going on. And I went downtown, and they had me in a room with their attorney, and they started questioning me, and it just didn't go well at all. And my attorney finally showed up and got me out of there. And we're walking down the hallway, my attorney and I, and toward the elevator. My boss walks out of the office that we were in and yells down the hallway, "By the way, you're fired." And this is down in an office building down the hallway, maybe 50 or 100 feet. And I'm thinking, my attorney says, we figured that already. But it could have been handled a lot better than it was. And I think I think a professional firm would have gone one step further.
Sure.
So the crime was discovered in 2006, and I didn't get prosecuted for 2 years till the beginning of 2008, maybe a year and a half. I don't know what the delay was. I'm sure a professional firm would have pushed it along a little faster than what it was pushed along. But I was with my family, and I decided to write a book and speak around the country about embezzlement and how to protect yourself. At that point, I think I had learned my lesson, even before I went into prison. But I was looking at 60 to 66 months, this second crime, and it wouldn't have been a boot camp. It would have been in a real prison, and I ended up getting 63 months, and 63 months of soul searching, and I was released in January 2013, and with nothing. I mean, my wife divorced me, my kids wouldn't talk to me, and I had nothing. My best friend and his wife had to buy my clothes. I didn't even have the clothes on my back. And I've, in 8 years, 7 years, I've worked my way back to a position, a respectable position. I know what my limits are. I have financial pressures, but I pay that. I pay my financial obligations, every 2 weeks out of my paycheck, and I live within my means. I'm remarried. I'm afraid of my wife. She'll keep me in line. But I think it's important for business owners to understand how prevalent this problem is. When I first was convicted, I thought, boy, nobody embezzles money. Nobody does it. And the research I've done, and Sarah will tell you that it's everywhere. I live outside of Fort Wayne, Indiana, and at least once a week, there's an article in the newspaper about somebody getting victimized.
That was actually going to be one of my questions and we'll discuss more about prevention and detection in part 2. But this was a long time ago, where information was not that readily available. You didn't hear about these things as, social media and the news, the internet, all that kind of stuff, right? So it sounds like you believe it's still happening today, somewhat frequently. And so would that be accurate?
I think it's happening more frequently today. I think that people live beyond their means. I think people live at the edge of their credit cards. I think people create their own financial pressure, and they run into situations where they feel the need to steal. I work for a company now in Fort Wayne. We're a commercial construction company, and I got an invitation. I do all of our estimating. I work in the field and I do all of our estimating, but I was doing an estimate a couple weeks ago, and I was from a company that I'd never heard of out of Pittsburgh. And I kind of wanted to find a little bit out about the company, and I Googled the company, and it came up ex-construction company embezzlement. I said, that's interesting. This construction company out of Pittsburgh was just victimized to the tune of $8.9 million by their accounting manager. Wow. And she, I think it was over a 6 or 7 year period, stole, just about bankrupted them. It's everywhere. I wasn't thinking about the consequences when I was stealing money. I was thinking about the satisfaction that I would get with that next $4,000 or $5,000.
Sure. No, I can definitely see that. And again, it's interesting about the fact that you think that's actually more prevalent today. Sarah, I'd actually toss that question to you as well. What are your thoughts on what you're seeing, based on what you're seeing and what you know, as far as if this kind of thing is still happening today?
Forhad, that is a great question. I know that Barry spoke about how he perpetrated his fraud years ago, and is that still happening today? I believe, and I've seen, that companies still remain vulnerable. The types of fraud remain the same, very much along the lines of what Barry did in his 2 companies that he was with. Complacency is what remains, right? Like he mentioned, he was the one who received the bank statements.
Yep.
He was the one who dealt with the external auditors. And the thing with that is, who in the times now actually looks at the bank statements? Do you, as a company owner, take the time to see what is on your statements? Do you, as a company owner, look to or deal with the external auditors or any auditors, including your internal auditors? And the answer to that is a simple no. They place people in very, positions, in trusted positions, and they have managers that they've vetted or they think they vetted in order to handle these things. And we see over and over again that that is not the case. Mm-hmm. The one thing that has changed between when Barry actually did what he did to now is technology. Technology has given an edge to fraudsters, and that's how I see it, and that's how I think things are going, and things are going in that direction.
Interesting. Well, I'll tell you, this is definitely one of the more fascinating stories that I've heard directly from a person who committed the crime. But it's also a nightmare scenario in many ways. So we're going to break it off here. Please join us for the next episode where Sarah and Barry will talk about preventing and detecting this type of situation from happening to you. So thank you for joining us for part 1. Part 2 will be published in a couple of weeks. Don't miss it. And for your information, we are going to put Sarah and Barry's company information in the description of the podcast. You can also reach out to us if you'd like to get connected. And obviously, please send your comments and questions to info@integrasintel.com. Till next time.
Don't forget to follow Integris Intelligence on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. Don't forget to follow us. We are on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube.